Hello, and a very warm welcome back to History Whispers. I am Emma Carter, and I welcome you to episode 2 of our journey through the greatest philosophers of all time. In our last episode, we had such a fascinating and, I think, incredibly insightful discussion with Dr. Rhys Morgana about the philosopher king, Marcus Aurelius. It really set a high bar. If you missed that one, I do encourage you to go back and have a listen. Link is in the description. But today, we're shifting our focus, moving a little further back in time, actually, to explore another monumental figure, a philosopher whose ideas, though sometimes enigmatic, have rippled through the centuries. We're going to be diving into the world of Heraclitus. We'll be looking at his philosophy, his enduring legacy, and of course, trying to unpack some of those famously cryptic notions he left behind. And to guide us through this, I am absolutely delighted to welcome back our distinguished guest, Dr. Rhys Morgana. Thank you so much for joining us again on History Whispers.
Emma, thank you for having me back. It's a genuine pleasure to be here.
Dr. Morgana, Heraclitus feels like such a mysterious figure from the past. For our listeners just starting to learn about him, could you help us understand who he really was? Where did he come from, and when did he live? And those names people gave him later, the obscure and the weeping philosopher, they sound so dramatic and full of feeling. What was it about his life or how he saw the world that made people describe him that way? What's the real story behind those names?
Absolutely, Emma. Heraclitus is tremendously fascinating and honestly a bit heartbreaking. Let me paint that picture for you. He lived around 500 years before Christ's, so roughly 535 to 475 BC, in the magnificent, wealthy Greek city of Ephesus on the coast of what's now Turkey. He wasn't just any citizen. He was born into the ruling aristocratic family. He could have power, influence, the comfortable life, but he turned his back on it. He saw the political games, the maneuvering, and he scorned it. He gave up his hereditary position, his privilege, choosing instead to live a much simpler life. He spent his time thinking deeply, walking the mountains near Ephesus, and wrestling with the biggest questions about life, change, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. Now, those nicknames, Emma, they tell us so much about the man and how he was seen. The obscure, well, that comes directly from how he wrote. Heraclitus didn't write long, clear essays. He wrote in short, dense, often puzzling sayings, like riddles or proverbs. He meant for people to struggle with them, to think hard. He believed the deepest truths about the universe, what he called the logos, this divine, ordering principle, weren't obvious. You had to work to understand. As Aristotle later noted in his work Rhetoric, Heraclitus deliberately made his writing difficult. He thought most people were asleep to the real nature of things, and his style was meant to wake them up, to force them to dig deeper. So, obscure? Yes. But it was intentional. He wasn't being unclear for no reason. He was challenging his readers. And the other nickname, Emma, the weeping philosopher? This one cuts deeper and speaks volumes about his character and his view of the world. Ancient writers like Diogenes Laertes, who collected biographies of philosophers centuries later, tell us this story. They paired Heraclitus with Democritus, calling Democritus the laughing philosopher. Why? Because Democritus supposedly laughed at the foolishness of humanity. Heraclitus, they said, wept over it.
Dr. Morgana, hearing about Heraclitus's deep sorrow over humanity really shows how personally he felt his view of the world. To understand why it affected him so deeply, we need to get into the heart of his thinking itself. So, stepping back from the tears for a moment, how many core ideas or philosophies of Heraclitus do we actually know about today that survive? And could you walk us through each one of them? What were the key beliefs that shaped his view of constant change and caused him such pain?
Of course, Emma. It's impossible to separate his pain from his profound insights. While his original book is lost, later ancient writers like Plato, Aristotle and Diogenes Laertius quoted him and discussed his ideas. From these fragments, we can piece together three core notions that defined his radical view of the world, ideas that truly explain his deep frustration and sadness. First is the logos, the divine reason or order. This was the bedrock of everything for Heraclitus. He believed the universe wasn't chaotic. It was governed by a divine, rational principle he called the logos. This logos was the underlying order, the universal law that controlled all change. Think of it like the rules of a game that everything must follow. As he wrote in one of his fragments, listening not to me, but to the logos, it is wise to agree that all things are one. He felt this logos was accessible to human reason, but tragically, he saw most people ignoring it, lost in their private thoughts and sleepwalking through life. That disconnect was a deep source of his sorrow. Second is panta rei, everything flows in constant change. This is his most famous idea, Emma. Heraclitus taught that everything is in a state of constant, relentless flux. Nothing stays the same, not even for an instant. His most famous image captures this perfectly. You cannot step into the same river twice. As he likely elaborated elsewhere, fresh waters are ever flowing in upon you, and you yourself are changing from one moment to the next. Plato later discussed this in his dialogue Cratylus, explaining how Heraclitus saw even stable objects as constantly undergoing unseen transformations. This wasn't just about rivers. It was about life, death, the cosmos itself. Everything was process, not permanent substance. Seeing people desperately cling to possessions, status, or the illusion of an unchanging self, while the fundamental truth was constant flow, filled him with despair. They were building castles on sand. Third is the unity of opposites. Heraclitus saw the world as a dynamic tension between opposites. But crucially, he believed these opposites were necessary for each other and formed a hidden unity. As he put it, the path up and down is one and the same. Or, cold things warm up. The hot cools off. Wet becomes dry, dry becomes wet. Good and ill, war and peace, life and death. They weren't just opposites. They defined each other, they depended on each other, and they constantly transformed into each other within the grand flow of the logos. Aristotle noted this in his Physics, observing how Heraclitus saw harmony arising from tension, like a lyre's string pulled tight. Heraclitus likely saw the strife and conflict among people, the very things that upset him, as a necessary, though painful part of this cosmic tension. But people only saw the conflict, not the underlying unity within the logos. So, Emma, three core notions: the divine logos governing all, the principle that everything flows in constant change, and the hidden unity of opposites. These weren't just abstract ideas to him. They were the blazing truth he saw underlying a world where people were blind, clinging to illusions of permanence and stability. That blindness, that refusal to see the fiery, flowing, unified reality governed by the logos, that is what truly broke Heraclitus' heart and brought the tears. He saw the beautiful, terrible dynamism of existence and felt utterly alone in that understanding.
Three pillars: logos, flow, and unity in opposites. That piercing clarity you describe, it makes me wonder, what actually led Heraclitus to see the world through these three radical lenses? Was it something specific in Ephesus around 500 BC? The politics? The society? The very place he lived? And for our listeners, could you bring these ideas down to earth? Could you give us concrete examples from his own time? Maybe events he witnessed or everyday things Ephesian people dealt with that might have sparked or illustrated each of these philosophies. How did the logos, the constant flow, and the unity of opposites play out right there on the streets of Ephesus?
Absolutely, Emma. Heraclitus wasn't just thinking in the abstract. He was reacting to the very world around him in Ephesus during a time of tremendous upheaval. Let's imagine that bustling port city around 500 BC. The spark for the Logos, divine order. Ephesus was wealthy, powerful, and deeply unstable. It sat under the shadow of the rising Persian Empire. Factions fought for control. Aristocrats, like Heraclitus' own family, versus emerging democratic forces. It felt chaotic, like the world was coming apart. Yet, every day, Heraclitus saw the sun rise and set with perfect regularity over the Aegean Sea. He saw the seasons change, the tides flow in and out of Ephesus' famous harbor. This contrast, the human chaos versus nature's unbreakable patterns, likely cemented his belief in the Logos. As he wrote in his fragments, although this Logos holds forever, humans prove unable to understand it. He saw the divine order in nature's rhythms, while his fellow Ephesians were consumed by petty, short-sighted power struggles, ignoring the universal law governing everything. The magnificent Temple of Artemis, one of the seven wonders, stood as a symbol of potential order. Yet the city itself was in disarray. That disconnect, Emma, the visible Logos in nature versus human ignorance, was a constant, painful reminder. The proof of constant flow, or Pantarei, Ephesus faced a very literal, visible crisis. Its harbor was silting up. The Cayster River constantly deposited mud, threatening the city's lifeblood, its trade. Workers dredged it endlessly, a losing battle against nature's flow. Heraclitus saw this daily. As Plato later noted in the Cratylus, Heraclitus used the river image because he saw this relentless change everywhere. For him, it wasn't just philosophy, it was the smell of the silting harbor, the panic of merchants, the shifting alliances in the agora. His famous saying, "You cannot step into the same river twice," wasn't just a metaphor, it was a description of Ephesian reality. He saw people desperately building grand houses and hoarding gold, trying to hold on to permanence while the very ground beneath them shifted. It was a source of deep frustration. They wouldn't accept the fundamental truth unfolding before their eyes. And the reality of unity in opposites. Ephesian society was defined by conflict. The tension Heraclitus theorized wasn't abstract. He saw it in the brutal clash between the wealthy aristocrats, his own class, which he rejected, and the struggling common people. He saw it in the city's struggle for independence against the overwhelming Persian Empire. War and peace weren't just opposites, they defined each other. As Aristotle observed in his Nicomachean Ethics, Heraclitus pointed out that seawater is the purest and most polluted. For fish, it is drinkable and life-giving. For humans, undrinkable and deadly. He saw this tension in everyday Ephesus. The luxurious feasts of the rich depended on the labor of the poor. The city's famed beauty relied on the back-breaking, unseen work of slaves and laborers. The struggle for freedom intensified because of the Persian threat. Heraclitus likely saw this strife, the rich versus poor, Greek versus Persian, as a painful but necessary tension, part of the Logos. Yet, as Diogenes Laertes tells us, he despaired because people only saw the conflict, not the hidden unity. They fought against the opposites instead of understanding their interdependence. So, Emma, the cause was Ephesus itself, the chaos versus nature's order, the silting harbor proving nothing lasts, the brutal social and political conflicts showing opposites locked in tension. Heraclitus didn't invent these ideas in a vacuum. He looked at his city, its wealth, its decay, its strife, and saw the Logos, the flow, and the unity of opposites playing out in real time. That is why his weeping feels so tragic. He wasn't just a philosopher. He was a heartbroken witness, seeing the fiery truth of existence blaze in the very streets where others saw only fleeting power or daily survival. He saw the divine pattern in the chaos, the river changing as they stood on its banks, the war within the peace, and no one else seemed to see it.
So his philosophy, it wasn't just thought, it was felt. The silt choking the harbor, the strife in the marketplace, the sun rising over a city blind to its own rhythm. He translated the pulse of Ephesus into universal truths, and the cost of that clarity was his tears.
Exactly, Emma. You've touched the heart of it. He didn't just observe Ephesus, he felt its decay, its strife, its fleeting beauty as proof of universal truth. That's why he wept. To see the Logos blazing in a world choosing blindness, it cost him everything. He was the weeping philosopher not by chance, but because truth, seen so clearly, can be the loneliest burden.
Dr. Rhys, I think we felt the weight of Heraclitus's tears and seen how Ephesus's decay and strife shaped his truths. Now, one of his most striking ideas haunts me: fire. He called it the most essential element, the very soul of the universe. For our listeners, could you unravel this? What was his philosophy behind seeing fire not just as flames, but as the core reality? And why, in a world of earth, water, and air, did he believe fire was life's fundamental force?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about this, Emma. Fire wasn't just an element to Heraclitus. It was the living symbol of his entire philosophy. Remember his core ideas, the logos, pantare, and the unity of opposites? Fire embodied all three. He saw fire as the primordial substance of the cosmos. As he wrote in one of his surviving fragments, this world was ever, is now, and ever shall be an ever-living fire, with measures kindling and measures going out. Why fire? Let me give you concrete reasons. Constant change. Fire never stays the same. It flickers, grows, consumes, transforms wood into ash and heat, then vanishes. Unlike earth, solid or water, seemingly persistent, fire visibly lives the truth of constant flux, or pantare. You can't step into the same flame twice. Transformative power. Fire changes everything it touches. Think of Ephesus. The sacred flame in the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders, wasn't just religious. It represented divine power transforming offerings. Blacksmiths forging weapons in the agora, fire turned raw ore into tools, embodying creation and destruction. Wildfire sweeping the hills, a terrifying force that cleared old growth, making way for new life. Unity of opposites, death enabling rebirth. The soul is fire. Heraclitus believed even the human soul was fiery. He wrote, "A dry soul is wisest and best." A dry soul burned bright with reason, aligned with the logos, while a wet soul, dampened by ignorance or excess, sputtered weakly. This is why he despaired, because he saw most souls as smoldering ash, not radiant flames. Cosmic order, logos. Fire follows invisible laws. It needs fuel, air, and kindling. Its flickering isn't chaos. It's a dance governed by the logos. For Heraclitus, the sun was a cosmic bowl of fire sailing across the sky with perfect regularity, divine order made visible. So why fire over earth, water, or air? Earth was too still, denying change. Water seemed eternal but hid its flow like the Ephesus silting harbor. Air was invisible, untouchable. Fire? It was alive. It changed. It ruled. It was the universe's heartbeat, the only element that perfectly mirrored the fiery, restless, transformative reality he saw everywhere. To Heraclitus, fire wasn't just essential. It was existence itself, burning bright and fleeting, just like human life. And that is why his tears felt like embers cooling in the dark.
Dr. Morgana, that vision of the cosmos as eternal fire, consuming and renewing, was truly mesmerizing. It makes me wonder about Heraclitus's haunting legacy. If his world was pure flux and flame, how did the giants who came after him grapple with that? Specifically, Plato and Aristotle, pillars of Western thought themselves. When they looked at Heraclitus's radical ideas, the river that's never the same, the universe as fire, the unity born of strife, did they build upon his foundation? Or did they push back against it? How did these two titans view the weeping philosopher? And did his fire leave lasting embers in their own work?
Absolutely, Emma. Think of Heraclitus as the essential spark that forced Western philosophy to grapple with change. Plato deeply respected his insight into the flux of the physical world, the river forever changing, the fire consuming and renewing. In dialogues like the Theaetetus, Plato essentially agrees, yes, the world we perceive is in constant Heraclitean motion. But he saw this as a profound problem. If everything changes, how can we have true knowledge? His solution was the eternal, unchanging forms, a higher reality beyond the senses. So Plato used Heraclitus's unsettling flux as the very foundation, proving the need for his world of perfect ideas. Aristotle, however, took a different path. In his Metaphysics and Physics, he launched a fierce critique. Heraclitus's extreme flux, he argued, violated the fundamental law of logic, the principle of non-contradiction. Something cannot both be and not be at the same time. He also rejected fire as the primary element. Yet Aristotle didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. He brilliantly systematized change through his concepts of potentiality and actuality, and acknowledged the tension of opposites. He absorbed Heraclitus's core reality of transformation, but framed it within a logical structure of enduring substances and balanced elements. So, while both giants pushed back against Heraclitus's extremes, Plato escaping flux through the forms, Aristotle containing it within logic and substance, his burning questions were indispensable. Heraclitus didn't give them answers. He gave them the fire that forged their own monumental systems. His tears were the price of igniting that eternal flame in Western thought.
Well, Dr. Rhys, we'll certainly have another podcast diving deep into these Western philosophers. But for now, I want to ask, in our turbulent times, with politics in constant flux and personal lives navigating relentless change, does Heraclitus's ancient wisdom about impermanence and tension offer us any wisdom? Can his tears and fire help us understand our world?
Emma, Heraclitus feels painfully relevant today. His fire isn't just history, it's the flickering screen of our phones, the headlines shifting by the hour. Let me show you how. 1. Politics. The river never stops flowing. Heraclitus's everything flows, pantare, is our reality. Think of modern democracies. Leaders rise and fall overnight. Brexit chaos, unexpected elections. Alliances fracture like burning wood. And social movements surge, then fade like waves. Heraclitus wouldn't be surprised. He'd say this impermanence is the natural state. His unity of opposites explains our polarization. Left versus right. Globalism versus nationalism. These tensions aren't just conflict, they define each other, like fire needing air. As he said, strife is justice, not endorsing chaos, but recognizing tension as the engine of change. The Logos whispers. This churn is the cosmos rebalancing. 2. Personal growth, embracing the fire. Heraclitus's tears weren't defeat, they were clarity. Today, we fear impermanence, careers dissolving, AI disruption, relationships evolving, identity shifting. But Heraclitus would urge, don't fight the river, step into its flow. Your soul fire matters. He taught, a dry soul is wisest. A dry soul is focused, adaptable, burning clear amid chaos, like mindfulness or resilience training today. A wet soul drowns in distraction, resisting change. Tension equals growth. Burnout, divorce, failure. Heraclitus saw opposites as intertwined. Pain fuels growth. Cold things warm up. The hot cools off. Losing a job, destruction, can ignite a new passion, creation. Let go of permanence. Clinging to fixed plans or identities causes suffering. His tears were for those asleep to this truth. Modern psychology echoes him. Acceptance, ACT therapy, frees us. Why his tears and fire guide us? His fire isn't just destruction, it's the transformative energy. His tears, compassion for those resisting the flow. In a world of algorithms and anxiety, Heraclitus whispers, "You are part of the Logos, the eternal pattern. Your struggle is the tension that moves the universe. Burn bright, adapt, and weep not for change, but for those too afraid to step into the river." He doesn't offer easy answers, Emma. He offers courage to see the world as it is, a beautiful, terrifying, ever-changing flame. And in that, there's strange peace.
Dr. Rhys, after this journey through Heraclitus's tears, fire, and the river of change, I have to ask something personal. Out of all his fragments, those shards of wisdom we've touched on today, which one cuts you deepest? What's your favorite insight from the Weeping Philosopher, and why does it stay with you?
That's a wonderful question, Alma. Thank you. It's so easy to get lost in the academic side of things, but these ideas, they are meant to be lived. The one that cuts the deepest. There are so many. The river, the idea of hidden harmony. But I think the one that has stayed with me most, almost like a constant companion, is a very short and simple one. The usual translation is, character is destiny. On the surface, it's so simple, but it's one of those ideas that just grows bigger the longer you think about it. For me, it completely changed how I see life. Before I really understood it, I think I believed that life was something that just happens to you, a series of outside events, good luck, bad luck, things you can't control. But Heraclitus says no. The path your life takes comes from the inside. It grows out of who you are, your habits, your choices, your honesty, your courage, your fears. It's the most empowering idea in the world because it tells you that you are the one holding the pen. You are writing your own story with every choice you make. And at the same time, he's telling us to work on ourselves, to be better, because that is the only thing that will truly shape our future. It's not about wealth or status. It's about the core of who you are. That idea, that deep, personal responsibility, it stays with me every single day. It's a constant whisper, a reminder.
Wow. Character is destiny, Dr. Morgana. That's incredibly powerful. Honestly, that's going to stay with me for a long time. Thank you for sharing that. And I imagine many of our listeners feel the same way right now, completely captivated. So, as we begin to wrap up this fascinating discussion, I have one final, very practical question. So, for our listeners who've been inspired by this and want to take that first step themselves, where would you recommend they start? Is there a good accessible book, a particular translation, or maybe an introductory text that can help guide them through these profound ideas without feeling overwhelmed?
That's a brilliant and, I think, essential question, Emma. My first piece of advice is actually what not to do. I would advise against just picking up a book that is only a list of his fragments and trying to read it from page 1. It can feel like trying to understand a brilliant movie by only looking at a handful of random screenshots. You'll see the genius, but you'll miss the story. So here's what I recommend. Start with the guide. You need a map before you enter the forest.
A really wonderful and accessible book is Pre-Socratic Philosophy, a very short introduction by Catherine Osborne. It's a small book, very easy to carry around, and it does a beautiful job of painting a picture of the world these early thinkers, including Heraclitus, lived in. It helps you understand the kinds of big questions they were all trying to answer. Then, once you have your bearings from a book like that, you can turn to the words of Heraclitus himself. For that, I'd highly recommend a collection called The First Philosophers, translated by Robin Waterfield. The great thing about this book is that he doesn't just give you the fragments, he weaves them into a larger explanation. He holds your hand a bit, explaining the context and what Heraclitus likely meant. It makes the ideas come alive. So, in short, start with the modern guide to get the bigger picture, and then use a well-explained translation to explore his words. And the most important thing is be patient. You don't read Heraclitus to get answers. You read him to find better questions. Let the ideas wash over you. Just like the river he so famously spoke of. It's a journey worth taking.
Dr. Rhys Morgana, I genuinely don't have the words to thank you enough for this conversation. It was such an impactful and I would say deeply moving exploration of a brilliant philosopher, to take us from the weeping philosopher to something as profound as character's destiny. That was just wonderful. Thank you.
The honor was all mine, Emma. It's always a privilege to have the chance to talk about these great thinkers. Thank you for inviting me.
And with that, we have to bring this episode of History Whispers to a close. I'm so happy that we could spend this time together exploring the world of Heraclitus today. It really feels like we've journeyed somewhere special. Now, our series on the greatest philosophers will continue, and we want you to help us decide which historical figure should we talk about in our next podcast. Who are you curious about? Please, let us know in the comment section below. We read every single one. Until the next Whisper from History, take care.